Hello, this is Daniel with PwnCNC, and I'm here with the newest product, the Vise. Stick with me and we'll talk more about it. Okay, what your Vise will basically come with are a couple of flat jaws. I'm going to come out with some additional designs for this, and I'll have these jaw pieces available separately at a much lower cost, obviously, than the entire kit. But the kit basically includes the fixed base, the movable base, a couple of jaws, and a force piece. And I'll show you how to use all this in just a moment. This is being released for the Carbide 3D's hybrid T-track design. So the hole spacing for mounting this to the bed is perfectly in line with the T-tracks on their hybrid bed. I will be releasing additional versions of the fixed base for both the 4-inch, 75, and 80 millimeter hole spacing. But for right now, this is what I've got released is for the carbide release bed, or carbide hybrid bed. But that also means I have a little extra pack here available for, which includes T-track nuts, some screws, some washers, everything you need to kind of mount it right into that carbide bed. We'll go over that in just a second. For the basic assembly of the pieces, we're going to start with our fixed bed, or for our fixed base. Now there are already a couple of heat inserts in there, so the installation or assembly of this piece is pretty easy. We're just going to take one of the jaws, place it right onto the onto those index pieces right there. Just put it right on there. We're going to take one of the M5x20 screws and one of the smaller washers. Drop that right down in there, and then we can use a hex wrench here to just screw it right down into place. Now it will catch, and there we go. The screws should sit just barely flush with the surface of the bit, or the jaw. Now make sure the jaw is pushed all the way back against this bumper so that it gets the maximum amount of force with very little effort on the screws that we're putting in right now. Put the other one in. There it goes. All right, now we got both of those in there. And this thing is ready for mounting onto the bed, and I'll demonstrate that here a little later. So the movable base is the more unique piece. It's got multiple, lots of hardware. Most of this hardware actually goes right onto the mobile base. So the mobile base, we're going to take a couple of my very special square tracks here. Drop the square track right down in there, and it should snap right into place. Same with the other side. Drop it down in there, and it's okay if it doesn't snap, but it looks like this one might need to be adjusted. Let's see. My manufacturer got a little overzealous with bending these pieces, and sometimes the square nut doesn't fit perfectly in there. But what you can do is just take a wrench or something like, or a pair of pliers, just kind of bend that just gently, bend that U out a little bit, and then we should get our experience there. There it goes. Nice snap in there. So the next thing we're going to do is take a couple of these square nuts. There's a curved piece on the square nut. Put that towards the long opening here. Drop that right into place there. Same one with the other square nut. Just drop that in. Then we're going to grab one of our jaws here. Drop that right down in there. Take an M5 by 20 and one of our small washers, just like we did before. Drop that down through. But this time, hold on to that screw, turn it over, and drop a square nut right on there. Now this will take a little bit of effort. Just try to hold that screw right over that nut right over the screw. It's easier to do when I'm not trying to demonstrate it. So you're going to need to put a little bit of force on there to get that threading to start. There's very little room under there. There it goes. It started. And then what you can do is just go ahead and tighten it down. That will press some of this extra 3D material right here. It'll press it down flat and give you a nice connection there. Then you can back that screw off, and then the jaw will move without losing hold of that screw. Now, the more you use it, the less likely that screw is to fall off. But just in case you are using it and it falls off, know that it's really easy to put back on. So we're going to drop that down there, hold that screw in, flip it over, hold the nut with my left hand, and then do the exact same process. Just kind of screw it down in till the threads catch, tighten it down to press down some of that plastic, and then back it off. And then the whole jaw should slide back and forth, and it'll slide along that, it'll slide along that track. And it'll be easier once we actually have it on the machine to understand what the heck's going on. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take one of these M5 by 25 millimeter screws, put that washer through it, take our force piece here, drop that down through. And do the same thing to the other side. M5 by 25, drop the washer through it, drop it down through the force piece, and then we've got our screws here. And this is going to join into those two square nuts we dropped in initially. Slide that in there. Give it a couple turns to get it started. Of course, I've got it cockeyed there. Let's try that. Now, as you screw this down, it will eventually make contact with these two screws here. And this plastic piece and the screws pushing on the other screws help to push that force and the jaw itself up into the material to make a strong connection. So just make sure you're loosen this up a little. Push that jaw piece back towards the force. And once that force makes contact with it, you're good. The jaw should still move, freely move right along there. And now we have our vise all assembled on both pieces, the fixed base and the movable base. Now let's take a look at our extra hardware. And this, again, this is for the Carbide 3D's hybrid table. We're going to take a couple of our track washers and drop that into place. These are the 1/4 by 20 track washers. And then we're going to take a 1/4 by 20 screw, drop that down in there, and that's how it's going to hold down onto the bed. The same goes for the other side. We're going to take just a regular circular washer, drop that through, drop it through either the first or the second hole. Let's drop the washer in first. Since I already put the jaw on there. There it goes. Drop the screw down in there. Take our other washer, drop that into place, drop it down in there, and now it's ready to mount right onto the machine. So our next piece that we need to work on is assembling our T-track nuts. So these are a very special T-track nut that I've designed. I'm trying to make it as compatible as possible with as many types of T-tracks as possible. So in this case, because the Carbide 3D has a much larger size to its track, I needed to create a spacer which screws right onto the T-track nut. So I'm going to come in from the bottom. Here, let me do a little bit of hole cleanup there. There it goes. Now the screws should just drop right through there. And take our T-track nut. It should form right onto the plastic. screw down in there, and you're actually going to be going down into a couple of the holes on the other side. There are M3 holes on either side of the main anchor hole, and I'll show you that in just a second. So I've got one. Let's get the other going. There it goes. So now that's all flush and everything. And our screws, you'll notice here is the 2 holes for the M3 screws to hold the spacer. And of course the main anchor hole. And this is where this gets screwed right onto there and slid right into the Carbide 3D's hybrid bed. So let's jump over to the actual machine itself and to the hybrid bed, and I'll show you exactly how to use that. And you guys can go ahead and assemble the rest of these T-track nut and spacers on your own. So let's jump over there. Okay, here I am at the my Shapeoko Pro's hybrid bed with the T-tracks and everything. I've got the vices, they're in there, they're loose at the moment. I'm going to show you how to mount those. And of course over here on the right I've got the some spacers that I designed, but again, well, not again, but these things can be made out of wood or anything like that. I've got them up on the website. I've measured them. They come in really close, like within a tenth of a millimeter. So these things are really nice, spot on for measuring and that sort of thing, especially for our wood projects. But a couple of spacers to help hold that stock up, and I'll show you how to use those in a minute. For now, what we're looking at is let's mount our fixed base here. So here's the piece of stock that I'm going to use to 3D carve something into, and I want to make sure that it is back far enough and somewhere sort of in the middle of my work area, and that way it doesn't overhang, so the front of the vise doesn't overhang the front of the machine. So if I place it just right about there, about the level of the screws here, these middle screws here, that should be sufficient. I'm going to take one of my squares here, bump it right up against the slat here, slide it back till it lines up with the fixed vise. So while holding the square, holding the vise at the same time, now I can tighten down this fixed vise and it won't go anywhere. Go, and it will be perfectly aligned. Now, of course, the fixed vise, the jaw on it is mounted so that it does not move. There it goes. Tighten that down, and now that fixed vise is in a fixed position and it does not move at all. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to put my square away. There's no need to have that at this point. But I am going to take, in my case, I'm going to take a couple of these 15 millimeter spacers here. I'm going to put them right about there, just enough to hold my stock up above. And then as I slide the movable base here forward to make contact with it, I'm going to make sure I push down on my stock. I'm also going to take a quick look at the level of the top of the vise with the stock material. Now, I'm not going to be cutting down into this much, very deep, just enough for a nice small 3D carving. And I want to make sure that that carving, the base of that carving is just above the jaw so that I don't carve into the jaw. But being that these are plastic, they're forgiving, they're easy to replace. So if you do, it's okay. So I'm going to hold the stock down and hold the base, the movable base, up against that with my thumb here. I'm going to hold that there. I'm going to take my screws that are going down into the T-tracks. I'm going to go ahead and tighten that down. Now, it's a good idea to have the screw or the anchor as far forward towards the middle of the stock as possible, just like I put of the 3 options here, I put the screw up here towards the front, towards the stock, so that it holds the front of the vise down. It's not absolutely required because in some cases you just can't get in there. So that's why I've provided a track on the movable side and 3 hole positions on the rear side there. So I'm going to hold all that together. Now at this point, the stock is not fixed. It will move. We have not put any force on it other than to bump the movable base up against the stock So there's a little bit of a connection there, but just hold it down. Don't move it around. The base here won't move yet, or the jaw here won't move yet. Just kind of tighten that down, just to gently tighten that down just enough to keep it down and keep those square nuts down below from releasing from these screws. Now, here's the interesting part. So now we're going to use this force piece to force, or to apply force. It, as it screws in this way, is going to push that jaw right into the stock. So we're going to tighten that down. Just be even, so every time you make a turn on one side, be sure to turn it on the other. And once you start getting some good resistance, then you can let go, and you'll notice that my stock, it wiggles just a little bit, so let's give it a tiny bit more. And again, we want to make sure that this is down onto those spacers, or that scrap material that you have down there, so that it holds it in place. Now, once you have it forced in and is holding, now you can tighten down the front of the jaw. What this will do is it'll hold the jaw down, it'll put a tiny bit more force down on this stock, and it will hold everything together. All right, now that I've got the base, or the stock all mounted, everything's all tightened down, it should not be going anywhere. And if I were to wiggle it, that stock did not move at all. Now it should be, if you look underneath the stock, it should still be sitting on top of the spacers. But there we go. The vise is ready to start carving. All right, let's say you've already done your carving, you're ready to release it. What you're going to do is basically the opposite of what you did to tighten it. So we're going to loosen up these two screws here, holding the jaw in place, loosen that up. Then we're going to come to the force part and release that. This will loosen the tension off from the jaw and allow you to shift it, releasing your stock. And you're all ready to go. You're ready to go for your next piece, because the jaw, it's all ready for your next piece of stock. So if you're doing multiple cuts at the same time, just repeat. Force, jaw, jaw, force. There it is. So I hope that was informative. You can use these vices. You can get multiple vices and place them all down here as well. Check my website, and I'll put it in the link in the descriptions for purchasing the vise, as well as purchasing the Maker's Pack files, or the Maker's Pack and the Maker files, so that you can print them all to your heart's content. The tricky part there is there are a couple of two very special components here. That's my track washers here on either side, as well as the square nut tracks. Those things are very custom parts. You're not going to find those anywhere else, but I do have them on my website. If you have any comments or questions, I would be very interested in jaw designs, in improvements, what you see wrong with this. Please let me know in the comments below. And yeah, don't just own your CNC, dominate it.